When most of us think about autistic characters in media, we imagine nonverbal savant males like the kid in the first season of Eureka or The Big Bang Theory, despite the fact that those nerd-faced cowards never had the stones to admit it. In the realm of media representation, the portrayal of autistic women often lingers on the periphery, their narratives either absent or oversimplified. Entrapta from She-Ra and Peridot from Steven Universe. And Netflix Australia is making strides with Heartbreak High. Hell, even Watson from Apex Legends is confirmed autistic. And this is great. As we learn more about the nuance of neurodivergence, genuine representation of these people and traits are going to be invaluable in helping newly diagnosed people realize that they are still humans, they are still people, and in many ways, they are still normal despite what society tries to tell us. My own family is on a neurodivergent journey, and I'm helping my wife through her recent autism diagnosis while raising 4 neurodivergent kids of my own. And I also am going through my own journey with ADHD and probably a bit of the autism itself. So in all of this, 2 fictional women really helped me understand what my wife experiences as a neurodivergent woman in a world of unpredictability and chaos. And in turn, me understanding those women better helped me understand my wife better, along with our 4 gifted but blatantly neurodivergent kids. Today I'm talking about Steris Harms from Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, along with Dr. Temperance Brennan from the TV series Bones. These women showed me that while my wife's love may be different and sometimes difficult to understand, she, along with Steris and Bones, are these amazing women who are not only capable and deserving of deep, genuine love, but are also more positive examples of autistic women in media, something that was deeply underrepresented up until late. If I were to try to contextualize the world of Mistborn leading up to Steris, it would require me to go through several hundred years of in-world lore. So the best way to really sum it up would be, imagine the Legend of Korra, except of element benders, we are talking about metal benders to an extent. So Aang's adventures would be Mistborn Era 1, and Korra's adventures would be Mistborn Era 2, which takes place a chunk of time after the story sets up the world that we are currently in. Did that make sense? No? Alright, well let's keep going anyways. Steris carefully follows current fashions to blend in, but as she says, I've learned to fake being normal, but prepared comments can only take me so far. People sense I'm not authentic. As a result of her autism spectrum disorder, ASD, also confirmed by Brando Sando himself, Steris often feels disconnected from those around her. She struggles with social cues and often feels anxious, misunderstood, and left out socially. She shows many of the prototypical traits in autistic women, such as social difficulties. Many women with autism experience challenges in social situations such as difficulty reading and responding to social cues. They may feel anxious in social settings and often feel left out or misunderstood. Camouflaging or masking. Women with autism often learn to hide their autistic traits to fit in with their peers. This can involve mimicking social behaviors of non-autistic individuals and suppressing their natural responses. Intense interests. Like their male counterparts, women with autism may have highly specific and intense interests. However, the nature of these interests may differ and can be more socially oriented or less recognized as quote-unquote typical autistic traits. Steris often describes herself as boring and mentions several times that others find it difficult to spend much time with her. Steris copes with her disconnection by being as prepared and as thorough as humanly possible. She always carries at least one notebook in which she keeps multiple lists. Steris has compiled lists of things like witty comments to use during conversations, and even on one occasion she had a 27-page list of things to bring for a literal spur-of-the-moment trip. At first, her sense of over-preparedness seemed weird and excessive to me. It's something that my wife does, and to be quite frank, I absolutely used to hate it, especially because she ended up usually being right and being overprepared. But just like Steris's arranged husband, Waxilium Ladrian, once I learned that these traits are a core part of my partner, I learned not to just accept it, but to embrace it in its entirety. The last 2 times that we tried to go camping here in beautiful Washington State, I tried to do the stereotypical manly dad thing and be like, oh yeah, I got it. And I would remember 75-80% of the stuff that we would need for camping, and then it got to the point where I would have to leave the campgrounds to go get whatever I forgot. And instead of just letting my wife make the prep list like she asked me to, I thought that I was doing her a favor by saying, no, don't worry about it, I got it. But in the end, she was right. I will say the relationship between Wax and Steris is an interesting one. They start out with a contract since both of them are of noble houses needing different political gains. But after Wax rescues Steris from a kidnapping turned conspiracy, it turns into a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. Steris becomes a very integral part of Wax's life, not just as his partner, but as someone who helps him grow in ways that he didn't even think he could. And her finally finding someone who fully and completely sees her, she finds her own place in a world that often feels like it wasn't made for her as well. Throughout the beginning of the story, when we see Steris struggle to understand feelings towards Wax, Steris is given moments of deep reflection and poetic expression, as well as moments of surprising honesty. She starts out as someone who's often misunderstood and underestimated. She's seen as a rigid and formal person with a stick up her butt. But as we get to know her, we see her wit, we see her depth, and we just see her incredible capacity for love and loyalty and family. Steris reminds me so much of my wife. I would constantly send her texts about all the things Steris did that reminded me of her. This was shortly after my wife started learning about her neurodivergence and how she is likely on the autism spectrum. Steris remarks about being hyper aware of other people's facial expressions and body movements in relation to her own, and it felt like a recap of a very similar conversation my wife and I had some time ago in regards to how she spent her whole life mirroring others in an attempt to be socially accepted. My wife is a planner and a prepper to the nth degree, a fairly stringent rules follower, and has hobbies and interests that are considered outside the norm. My wife is Steris, and one of the things that both of them do is have trouble with expressing themselves in a way that reflects their true emotions. I would describe it akin to those non-English words that describe very specific and complex emotions, or just having the core of what you're trying to say just beyond your reach. There is a passage in the second book where Steris gets to let her mask drop completely, and to me the scene was beyond moving because you could tell how much that was building up inside of her. And in that moment of clarity and lucidity and comfort, she gets to be her truest self and open up in a way she never did with anyone. And then, Steris said softly, perhaps I came along because of the way it feels. Marcy looked sharply back at her sister. Like the whole world has been upended, Steris said, looking toward the ceiling. Like the laws of nature and man no longer hold sway. They're suddenly flexible, like a string given slack. We're the spheres. I love the idea that I can break out of it all. The expectations, the way I'm regarded, the way I regard myself, and soar. I saw it in his eyes first, that hunger, that fire. And then I found it in myself. He's a flame, Waxilium is, and fire can be shared. When I'm out here, when I'm with him, I burn, Marcy. It's wonderful. Marcy's jaw dropped, and she gawked at her sister. Had those words left Steris's mouth? Careful, monotonous, boring Steris? She glanced towards Marcy and blushed. You actually love him, don't you? Marcy asked. Well, love is a strong emotion, one that requires careful deliberation to... Steris? Yes. She looked down at her notebook. It's foolish, isn't it? Of course it is, Marcy said. Love is always a foolish emotion. That's what makes it work. Listening to that moment via audio felt like what my wife has been spending years trying to elaborate in regards to her love for me. She isn't the type for long, flowery prose and pretty words. That's why she married me. But through Steris, I was finally able to understand that despite the fact that she can't articulate it, her love for me is as infinite and as amazing as the Cosmere itself. Cheesy, yes, but it is my video, so like, share, subscribe, or move on. To conclude, Steris is best girl of Mistborn, and she is probably my preferred example of autistic women done right in media. While her traits and stems may seem very weird or socially abrasive, underneath she is an insanely loyal ride-or-die partner. Wax was one of the few people who tried to actually get to know her, and in turn she gave herself to him completely. It's a story that's very familiar to me, and being able to understand more thoroughly from my wife's point of view only made me love and appreciate her more. Steris, that is. Steris is best girl. And now, if an overly prepared fantasy wife and an eccentric forensic anthropologist walked into a bar, well, they'd likely bond over their special interests, social camouflaging, and the fact that both parties include avid bone collectors who are somehow not creepy. So let's pivot over to bones. Dr. Temperance Brennan from the TV show and book series Bones is a character who's just as fascinating as Steris. Brennan is a forensic anthropologist, probably #1 in her field, who's brilliant but shows many autistic traits that would be considered quirky by early 2000s metrics.
You are not really here. So what's the story, Morning Glory?
I don't know what that means.
It means you're behaving strangely, and I'm asking you why.
She's not just about the science, though, as her character goes through a significant transformation throughout the series. The show's creator did say that she exhibits traits consistent with Asperger's syndrome, but had to be masked, no pun intended, as a means of helping increase the show's appeal. Gross. However, Bones' neurodivergence was later confirmed by her actress Emily Deschanel, sister of Zoe Deschanel. So Brennan starts off as a bit of a lone wolf, relying heavily on her intellect and struggling with emotional connections. But as the series progresses, we see her open up, forming deep bonds with her colleagues and Seeley Booth, her partner both professionally and romantically. Over the show's different plot lines, she learns to navigate the complexities of personal relationships and embrace the roles of romantic partner, eventually to the role of mother and family member herself. Brennan learns to trust and rely on Booth, and together they tackle not just mysteries of the dead, but the challenges of living and loving. As a side note, I'd argue that the side characters within Bones' professional circle and the Jeffersonian, the show's version of the Smithsonian, represent different aspects of the autistic spectrum itself. Here's a quick rundown of some of them. Bones herself displays traits such as high intelligence, logical thinking, and issues with empathy and social awkwardness. Seeley Booth is basically the ADHD king to our autistic queen. His character has a background as an ex-gambler and a history of making impulsive decisions, but these traits are more related to his personality and experiences rather than being a result of any potential ADHD. But at the very least, Booth does tend to show traits in late diagnosis males, and the ADHD autism power couple is very hot right now. Also, just so you know, neurodivergent people are like stand users. They tend to just cross paths by fate and nature. But that's just a canon. A head canon. Next we have Angela, who plays the role of a forensic artist and is Brennan's best friend. Angela brings a more intuitive and empathic approach to the team. She often serves as a social bridge between Brennan and the rest of the world to help interpret emotional cues and social nuances. Her background being focused on things like social causes and activism is very much aligned with the strong sense of justice that autistic women do tend to feel. Dr. Daisy Wick shows a lack of social awareness very similar to Bones, and can be overly enthusiastic and literal, which might align with certain ASD traits. She is basically Bones Jr. Dr. Zach Addy is highly intelligent and extremely focused on details, often missing social cues and the bigger picture. His literal thinking and difficulty understanding sarcasm or lies could be seen as traits associated with ASD. I'm just gonna give you a spoiler alert right now. His hyperlogical nature is taken to an extreme, and he ends up going through a bit of a serial killer arc. He's convinced to do these killings by a third party, but the fact that his logic and mental faculties are played to that degree just feel a little bit misguided. But I'm just putting that out there for you. It's one of the few negatives I have about the show. There are a lot of other characters with very similar traits, but we are getting a little bit long. Seeing Steris and Brennan on the page and screen is a big deal. It shows that being autistic is just one part of who they are. They're successful, complex, and they grow throughout their stories. It's a refreshing change from the same old stereotypes, and it gives homies who are risen with autism someone to look up to and relate to in a very positive and progressive way. Media representation has historically reinforced these misconceptions by focusing heavily on the male autistic experience. These two characters alone debunk some of the most common misconceptions about women, men, and MBs on the spectrum. For example, there are people who think autistic women can't have successful careers or relationships. As Bone and Steris have shown us, many autistic women are highly intelligent and capable of having successful careers, relationships, and families. However, the effort required to mask autistic traits within various degrees of relationships can lead to exhaustion and burnout, which can lead to difficulties in said careers and relationships, especially if they do not have a support network that understands their specific triggers and stems. Many of these same people believe that autistic women can't be mothers as well. Once again, not true. Many autistic women are capable mothers. Their own experiences can help them understand and support an autistic child better. Ultimately, autism presents differently across individuals, especially between genders. In addition, many autistic women desire romantic relationships but face unique challenges like setting boundaries, being vulnerable, and finding compatible partners who understand their needs. And one more example with my wife. Currently, she is a postpartum doula. My wife's been doing that for like 10 years, and she's kind of hit like the pay cap for her career, so to speak. So now she's doing the legwork to go back to med school, and she's going to be a birth specialist, helping bring babies into this world. She's always wanted to help with births, and this is the way that she's gonna do it. And I believe in her 100%. I will be that Mr. Clean commercial wearing skimpy outfits cleaning the house with her doctor money that she will be bringing in. Best believe. I will be making stupid videos by night and just keeping the house clean by day. Alright, so to wrap up, creating more positive and authentic representation of autistic women in media is very crucial for increasing awareness and acceptance. We need more multi-dimensional characters that showcase the diversity of the spectrum, moving beyond stereotypes of just being socially awkward or being obsessed with STEM. Involving autistic writers, actors, and consultants is vital for portraying experiences like masking, camouflaging traits, and the unique challenges of later diagnosis with realism and nuance. Depict healthy relationships where boundaries are respected and autistic traits aren't viewed as obstacles to overcome, but valuable parts of someone's identity to appreciate. No more settling for demeaning tropes, please. And for those of us privileged to have an autistic woman in our life, try to take the time to educate yourself on how autism can manifest differently across genders. Try to create an environment of patience, acceptance, and accommodation, a judgment-free space to unmask without camouflaging. For example, whenever my wife asks to borrow one of my big shirts, I give her a couple different options so that way she has different textures or whatever to feel. It's not that hard. It's an extra step, technically, but it shows that you care. And you know, your significant other can make it up to you in other ways. Don't dismiss autistic traits as just how women are. Validate their experiences, respect their needs, whether that's time for solitude, engagement with special interests, or adjusting for sensory sensitivities. Be their advocate, not an enabler of unhealthy masking and people-pleasing. If you are ever fortunate enough to be in a position that can help highlight the stories of others, remember that increasing authentic representation goes hand in hand with fostering genuine understanding in our personal circles. Celebrate autistic women's strengths, perspectives, and humanity is the way Steris and Brennan taught me, and hopefully you to do. Hi everyone, YouTube gamer Naran Colan here. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. This is also a confirmation that this is my real voice, because I once got a comment saying that I was an AI voice, which is weird, but okay. Yeah. This is obviously a bit more of a personal video. I wanted to make it anyways, kind of just let you guys know a little bit more about me as a person and kind of just what goes on behind the camera. Yeah, I'd love to know anyone else's experiences, anyone's thoughts, feedback. Let me know if you want me to talk about more Mistborn. Let me know if you want me to talk about more Bones. Let me know if you want me to talk about anything in general, because I have a lot of stuff that I would like to talk about. So, as usual, you know, hit the like button. It should do a little animation. Hit the subscribe button. It should do a little animation. Hit the share button. It shouldn't do an animation, but if it does, then hey, they added something new. So why don't you just try sharing this and finding out? I'm on the road to 2,000. Once I hit 2,000, my wife will take me out on a date. So let's make that happen. Please, please, please. Yeah, I guess we'll do more news as we get bigger. But once again, thank you for your time. If you're new here, glad to have you. And yeah, I'm going to have my last video, my 30 Rock video, I'm going to have it at the end. I'd really appreciate it if you guys would check it out. That one was really fun to make, and it kind of talks about how 30 Rock predicted AI technology that we have today. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. And yeah, as we keep going, I'll create a bigger backlog. So thank you guys for joining me today, and thank you for your time. All right, bye.